if all the conditions are proper and appropriate, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a minute. If all the conditions are proper and appropriate, the testing can be very accurate. The problem, potentially, with breath testing, for example, is that the machine itself has some limitations with regard to its ability to properly perceive exclusively alcohol. For example, there's other substances that can be in human breath, like acetone, that can cause an interference with the machine and can be misread as alcohol. That's one problem with breath testing as it relates to the machine itself. There are a variety of potential problems as it relates to the person's who's being tested, so the driver's breath. So for example, if the driver has an issue with their respiratory system or with their digestive system, both of those potentially can have an impact on the result, and again can cause false high results. So a common potential problem with breath testing is if a person has an advanced state of heartburn, what we call GERD, GERD standing for gastroesophageal reflux disease. If the person has that condition, then what can happen is the raw alcohol as well as the alcohol vapors can erupt from the stomach into the mouth. And as the person's blowing into the machine can't distinguish the mouth alcohol from the breath alcohol, again causing the machine to report a falsely high result.
Let me jump in. Let's say someone is stopped, but they've had no alcohol at all. Could the stomach still throw, the gastro problem, could that still throw off a false positive?
No. In order for what I've just described, the GERD or gastroesophageal reflux disease, to be a problem with breath testing, there has to still be raw alcohol in the stomach. So for example, if the person has stopped drinking within the last couple of hours, all the alcohol will have left the stomach and passed into the small intestine, so there would be no alcohol left to erupt into the mouth, and therefore there'd be no defense or no problem with the breath test.
Okay, next, the blood test.
Yes.
What are the problems with that?
Well, again, blood testing, once it gets to the lab, provided the blood sample itself is in good condition, then the gas chromatograph, which is what they use to test the blood, it's a very sound scientific instrument. The potential problems, however, can most typically arise before the blood gets to the lab. So for example, there can be a multitude of issues or potential problems, contamination, that can occur during the draw of the blood from the person's arm. If the blood gets contaminated, that also can cause a false result.
How can you tell if the blood's contaminated? I mean, as a defense attorney, you're raising these issues. So what are you looking for so that you can raise these issues? Well,
the first thing in the instance of a blood test, which specifically is your question, the first thing I would look for is to determine whether or not the client's explanation of the drinking pattern makes sense as it pertains to their behavior at the roadside as well as the test result itself. So for example, if my client comes into the office and they tell me that they had, let's say, 3 drinks of alcohol, and I look at the videotape and I can see that the person looks very sober, and yet the blood test result is, let's just say, a 0.17, I would think that there's something wrong with that blood test, and I would want to figure out what that thing is. In order for me to make that determination, I would make a request to the state lab for the documents and things, what they call the case file, that would include all of the chromatographs and all of the documentation that they keep to establish that the machine is working properly. I can look at those chromatographs, the actual raw data, and see if there's a problem. That can tell me in and of itself that there may be a problem. I'm also looking for problems in the chain of evidence or problems with the conditions under which the blood was drawn. Again, any of which can have an impact on the end result.